And I would say, too, if you feel like you're disenfranchised, it's likely because you are disenfranchised.
Yeah.
We should be clear that the intent of a lot of the reforms that we're seeing is to make it harder for you to vote, or for some people, virtually impossible for you to vote. That's the whole point, is to lower participation in our elections, typically at the expense of one, demographic or another. It's not generally a uniform impact across society, these reforms.
Hey y'all, welcome to the Texas Forward podcast. Today we have Trent Newell on the podcast. He is a member of the Texas Forward Party Executive Committee, as well as a project and developer coordinator for the National Forward Party. Trent spent 7 years in the U.S. Navy as an intelligence officer before transitioning to a career in finance. He sat down with Julie to discuss bringing back competition in politics and changing the political incentive structure, what grassroots strategy really means for the Forward Party, and why local politics matter. Trent discusses what separates Forward from traditional third parties and why we don't consider ourselves one, and how we are offering another option for independent thinkers who want a party focused on solving real problems. If you know someone who is looking for an alternative in politics, we hope you'll forward this episode along. We appreciate your support. Thank you for listening. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Hi, welcome to the Texas Forward podcast. My name is Julie Cornegie, and we are here today with our guest, Texas EC member Trent Newell. Welcome to our podcast. I'm so glad you could make it out today.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Good.
So, we're here to discuss all issues Texas Forward. So I want to hear a little bit more about your journey to the Texas Forward Party. How you came here? What was your background?
Sure. So not to be too cliche, but I am a recovering Republican. So I've tended in my life to be somewhat more conservative, not overly so, but somewhat more conservative in my politics. But in the wake of the 2016 election and some of what transpired in the aftermath, I think we're all very familiar with that. It just became clear to me that there was a need for the current system, the current way that we do politics, the current political makeup wasn't getting it done, or at least wasn't getting done what I thought needed to be done. And I'll say too, just not to make it too sentimental or personal, but a lot of it truly is. I know this sounds cliche too, but it's not a cliche for me. A lot of it really is my kids. I look at them and think, there's I think non-negligible chance that they could grow up in a country that doesn't have the same freedoms and rights that we took for granted growing up, weren't even cognizant of growing up, and that is in general a more toxic and potentially in some ways dangerous, certainly politically dangerous place to live. I think about that a lot. So to the extent that me and my capacity and my position have, some ability to do something about that, I want to use my platform and my abilities to do something about that. I want to be able to look them in the eye one day and say, I did something, I attempted to do something, I did what I could in my circumstances to do something about that. So I came to Ford because I was initially with the SAM Party of Texas. Mm-hmm. I worked with a little bit of time volunteering for the Stand Up Republic Texas, found my way from there to the SAM Party of Texas, and then I think we all know that the SAM Party merged with the Forward Party, and I came over in that merger to the Forward Party to carry the fight on.
Awesome. That's definitely 100%. What can we do for the future is very much important.
Yeah, this is a long game.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think that is something that is definitely from a Texas specific. I know you mentioned the 2016 election, and that was kind of the turning point from you. From a Texas specific, where would you like to see implementing the change, and what most concerns you about what's going on right now in Texas?
I would step back just a little bit and say that regardless of how you feel about any certain issue, any certain policy, and we all have our opinions, our thoughts, our preferences, as we should. I think that's that, and we should discuss them and debate them. I think that's healthy for democracy. But regardless of how you feel about any given issue, at the end of the day, if the system is structured in such a way or has incentives that are such that You can't actually get those solutions through a legislature, through a city council, or your representatives are not incentivized to act essentially in the best interest of the largest portion of their constituents. Then it doesn't, to be blunt, really matter what you think about these different positions, because you have little ability to do anything about it anyway. And so I think Texas is in some ways a microcosm. Texas is a big state, but I think in some ways a microcosm as well of what's going on nationally. And I think you're seeing a lot of move to restrict people's ability to vote. I would say their right to vote in many states, and Texas is no different. And I think that's what concerns me the most, is that Texas has taken a number of steps, in some cases following the leads of other states, to make it harder to vote, in particular harder for certain demographics to vote, to make it more onerous and cumbersome, to make it harder to simply be eligible to vote. To me, that's just fundamental for a healthy democracy, meaning we don't fully have healthy democracy here. And so you don't fully have the ability to affect change in those policies that mean the most to you. And so I think ultimately it's all fundamentally about the system, the way it's designed, the way it's structured, and the incentives that it responds to. We have to change those things before we can sustainably change the policies that matter to us the most.
Well, in your opinion, why is Forward different?
I think Ford's different because it is focused on changing those things before we change the policies that we all care about the most. I think it's a realistic, very practical acknowledgement that the back and forth and elect this party, and then two seats later in the next election we've got the other party, and everything that the previous administration done is undone by the next one. That isn't working. In particular, it's not sustainable. You can't sustainably solve problems that way. So I think the Ford Party of Texas realizes that we have to have structural change to the system. Politics has to work differently. It has to be more competitive. It has to be fairer. There has to be broader participation, easier participation. Not that there shouldn't be controls and safeguards and everything else. Of course, there should be. But I think it's very much a realization that we have to have a system that creates the incentives and the possibilities to solve these problems. And if you have a truly competitive system, it's pretty hard to have a back and forth between two parties, or swing elections about 2 seats in a given election cycle. That's a function of a two-party system in which the United States is a bit of an oddball in that regard, anyway.
Yeah, definitely. As one of the world's richest society, when you look at other societies like the UK or that have the multi-party systems, so we definitely have kind of held ourselves back between the two choices, or as some people call it, the lesser of two evils. Right. What are you most excited about pursuing with the Ford Party?
I'm most excited about the fact that the Ford Party is the most likely to achieve that vision. There are not a lot of frankly, a lot of other groups have thrown the towel in. There's not a ton of other groups who are attempting to do what we are attempting to do in the way that we're attempting to do it. There are not other groups that are further along in attempting to do it than we're attempting to do it. There are a lot of advocacy groups, and that's important. We need to advocate. There are other parties, and that's important. We need other parties. In fact, the Ford Party of Texas would like to create a system in which not just the Ford Party, but other parties too can be more competitive. We welcome that competition. We're not looking for a 3-party system. We're looking for a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-party system. And I think that sort of clear focus on reform and not self-centered reform, I think that's key. It's not Ford self-centered reform, makes the Ford Party the most likely to achieve what we need to achieve here. I think everyone likes an underdog in sports, but not in politics. We don't need to be we don't need to be the underdog here. We need to be the organization most likely to succeed, not because it's important for us, but because it's important for Texas and for the broader nation. And those are things that we need to accomplish beyond ourselves.
100%. And one of the things you mentioned was reform, which is the key to the Forward Party. It's election reform, and that comes in ranked choice voting and open primary, star voting. How do you see that fundamentally, like we addressing that in Texas and bringing that to the forefront?
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, we were talking before the show started that this is very much the long game. And so are you going to see ranked choice voting come out of the next couple of legislatures? Probably not. But this is why this is the long game. We don't define success on do we achieve everything we need to achieve in the very next election cycle. I think it's my guess is it's likely to be implemented here in ways that it's been implemented in other places, which is cities might use it, some more local governments and municipalities start using it, states eventually implement it, but it takes sustained advocacy, and it takes electing the right people to office. That doesn't mean even necessarily just forward ballot line candidates, but it just candidates who are committed to reforming the system or open to having that conversation. But we want to be realistic, but I think also have that determination to keep our eye on the ball for the long game. And this is likely to be a battle that's won in pieces. There'll be a certain reform here, a certain reform there, that over time will cumulatively add up to a reformed system. But it won't happen overnight.
No, and I totally agree that this is something that's we're not going to see it in the next election cycle. We might not see it in the next election cycle. I think my goal is 2030.
I can definitely get on board with that.
Right? Yeah. So, but obviously for our viewers who might not be familiar with ranked choice voting or open primaries, or because, electoral reform is definitely not something as I don't want to say sexy, but I'll just go ahead and say as some other issues that we run on. I think that it's important to get that education out there and to continue bringing that up as, hey, there is an alternative. There is a different way that we can be doing that. And so, definitely. I 100% agree that, long
Well,
run.
but and let me just say too that, we're not, that's part of our, you're right. It's not super sexy, at least not to not to non-political types, and most people are not ultra political types. But we're not here just to do the sexy things. We're here to advocate and basically represent everyone in some form or fashion, the best interest of our state, our country, our society, and so. It means that we do need to keep the focus on some things that maybe aren't in the broader public awareness top of mind all the time, but they are necessary in order to achieve those things that are broader awareness top of mind all the time. And so when we have candidates in the not too distant future, they will certainly have positions on some of these more top of mind issues, but it's important for us to keep our focus on what we need to do in order to enable those people to succeed in that way, and to keep our focus even if it's not always the most popular thing to do.
No, but it is one of the most important things.
Most important, absolutely.
Yes, definitely. Now you mentioned candidates, so can you give us any background? How are we going to approach that on a state level, from recruiting to supporting? The whole everything.
Yep. I think we want to take an all of the above approach, and and to be clear, some of this is my opinion. Some of this is just Trent Newell talking. Doesn't mean it's going to carry the day with the Forward Party of Texas, but clearly, when we have ballot access, we want to have Forward Party candidates. We want to have candidates on those ballot lines. So we want to have our own candidates. I think very strongly that we should be endorsing candidates for office. So clearly not just Forward Party candidates, but independents. I personally am willing to consider candidates in the two major parties. I think it's debatable in Texas whether we have two major parties, or virtually a monopoly at this point. But what are traditionally thought of as the two major parties, I'm willing to consider that, as long as to me it's not about the label. It's not about the party or the non-party. It's about, are you aligned to our values and to our principles, to our priorities, And are you committed to the types of reforms that we believe need to be achieved in order to get the system to where it needs to be? And I think we need to look at an all of the above approach. If we exclude any options, it will be harder for us to achieve that mission.
Definitely. And as you know, our next election cycle, or next big election cycle, is an election year. So we definitely want to be considering everyone. So you live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Keller, Texas. And
Close to Keller.
Yeah, close to Keller. So part of the our approach is definitely a grassroots local approach, empowering citizens in the state of Texas to get active in their local communities and meet like-minded people. Right. How do you think? I mean, obviously, what do you feel is the best approach to achieve this, to that community mobilization, and how do you guys go about it in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, achieving that goal?
Yeah. Well, so I think when you're talking about grassroots, you're kind of talking about everybody, and so that's another place where I kind of take an all of the above approach, because there's no one method or way of communicating or engaging with people that will reach everybody. And so, I think a number of things. First of all, I think it's important to realize the importance of the grassroots and that we're very serious when we mean that. This is not top-down driven. So we talked initially at the beginning about how important it is for everyone to vote, for everyone to be able to vote. It's hard for us to create those incentives for you to vote if it's not about you in the first place, if it's not about the grassroots in the first place. So we're serious when we say that this is about the grassroots. It's about you, the voter. We want you to collaborate with us and build this with us from the bottom up. So what does that look like in reaching the grassroots? I think it involves meeting people where they are. There are people who are, more comfortable, very comfortable in person. We should be having in-person events at people's homes, at local venues. We've done a gathering not too long ago at a small kind of restaurant bar in the area and had excellent turnout. We've had more formal events in office space where we sat and just talked about the issues and what we hope to achieve. We had good turnout. Some people are just more comfortable online. Some people don't want to engage in person as much. Totally fine. We need to have, and I don't mean necessarily at the state level even, but here in the Dallas area, we need to have an online presence and messaging approach. Developing that across different metro areas. Everything that's a very long term, effort, and I get that. But the point is, we need to be meeting people where they are. If we have some of the national principals in town, we need to take advantage of getting them in front of maybe larger audiences here. So really an all of the above approach, I think, is how we do this. And I think the important thing is to keep doing it. These are not one shot and done. We need to keep engaging people, keep providing opportunities for people to engage with us, keep people involved in the effort. That's how we build it.
What have you found the feedback when you've had these events?
I would say more curiosity than anything else. You certainly have people coming from legacy organizations who are a little more involved, a little more comfortable, a little more familiar with who we are and what we're trying to accomplish, and they're continuing to stay engaged like that. We love it, but we have to grow our audience, and I think we've had a degree of success with that. I mean, most of the people who are attending these events are, I would say, curious about it. They heard about it from a friend, or they're invited. They saw it online, saw some of your content online, and wanted to show up and just hear more about it. And so really it's just a conversation with them about what we're trying to do and listening. And I think that's key, and we have to seriously do that. If we're committed to growing this from the bottom up, the bottom needs to have a pretty powerful voice in that growth and development. And so all of these events are opportunities, and we do, to listen to people's thoughts on what we're trying to do and what we should do.
Do you feel that, when they, individuals leave these events, they come back with a clearer picture? I mean, you've already talked about the turn, they keep coming to the event, but they're already established.
Right.
So are we recruiting new people who like our message and want to learn more? Because a lot of this is or what I've coined from the very beginning, a work in progress. Yep. So there are people that I have talked to that I've met very beginning, but there are also people that I'm meeting every day. So would you say that you have that same level of
Yeah, I would say so, but I would say a healthy, at least in my personal observation, I would say a very healthy number are coming out of frustration with the current political system, with the current parties and the current options, or frequently, especially in Texas, lack of options, and they've heard that there's another party, another organization attempting to change that, to provide an alternative, and so they're curious about that. And it's incumbent upon us to take those people who are coming in for any reason, but people who are coming in because of concerns with the current system, and explain to them what we're doing to address those concerns and change that system, and why this is the right organization, and this is the right time to accomplish that.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of times when the third party phrase is a bad word or bad phrase, or
Right.
it's just, we're going to repeat 1992, we're going to repeat 2002. It's just, so it's like, how do we break away from that negative connotation when you have third party and say, no, we're different?
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't really like the term third party because it reminds me a lot of third wheel. And we're not, this is not a third wheel party. I mean, and I think that's important to realize, that in our words and in our practice, where, for example, the National Forward Party has been clear that they aren't running a candidate in the 2024 presidential election. So we're clear about what our focus and priorities are, and what we're attempting to do isn't to create a system in which, there's these two giant, behemoth political parties, and then we've created our little third wheel appendage over here. We're not aspiring to be that. That we're not even aspiring for there to be three in the first place. So once we establish ourselves, are we going to start talking about, I'd hate to be a fourth party, or I'd hate to be a fifth party? Yeah. People don't say that. It's just developed connotations that I think are not reflective of the reality of what third parties in general, and ours in particular, are attempting to accomplish. And so we're attempting to create a multi-competitive system where the expectation is that in many local elections, especially, neither Republican or Democrat are winning that election. Maybe the third, fourth, fifth party wins. Maybe a fully independent candidate wins. Great. Maybe a Republican or a Democrat who's a reasonable pragmatist, not from one of their, unfortunate elements, wins. But that's what we want. We want to create that competitiveness to get more practical, solutions-focused candidates into office, regardless of their label or where they come from.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, competition is really good for the soul.
Look, all of us agree that competition is good for the economy. Competition is healthy competition is, most of us think, good for kids and their development growing up. In most aspects of our lives, we think some degree of healthy competition is a good thing. So why is it so hard to believe that a little bit of competition, a little bit of healthy market-based competition, because there's a lot of demand for this. We're not creating that demand; we're meeting that demand. We're offering a product that there's a lot of demand for. It shouldn't be hard to see that competition in that space is a good thing. And look, I don't think you have to look any further than some of what you mentioned, we discussed at the beginning, is happening here in Texas, to see that the other side also thinks that the other sides also think that a little bit of competition could be a good thing, and so they're trying to limit it. If they didn't think it would have much of a difference, they wouldn't try to limit it. Because there's also a lot of reputational risk associated with it.
Definitely. I mean, it just gives me hope that definitely after 2020, going through 2020, paying attention for the news cycle, the 24-hour news cycle for the first time in my life, that Ford came along, and it's, no, we're not going to do the moonshot to the White House. We're going to work locally to build this party to where either you're a you're running for local judge or your school board school board councilman, that we're working towards finding people that are solution driven and kind of rising above the noise. And that's the one takeaway that I have is we've got to rise above the noise and work on what's the problem is.
Right.
What's the problem?
Right.
We can point fingers all day long, but at the end of the day, are we meeting every resolution? Are we coming to any resolution on the issues that have been plaguing our society?
Yeah, well, and I think the kind of local first approach is a little bit part and parcel to achieving that, because if you think about, most of the issues that affect you in your personal life, most of them are local laws, local policies, state laws, state policies, state regulations. In Texas, property tax is a concern for many people. The president doesn't have anything to do with your property tax. Things like that are kind of front of mind for a lot of people. Those of us with kids are thinking a lot, especially, I've got very young kids who are in the not too distant future to be entering daycare and into the school systems. Education is something that is really top of mind for us now at the point we are in our lives. Aside from some federal funding and a couple of other little ways that there's some involvement, largely your child's educational experience and quality of education is driven by your state and local politicians, elected officials, your school boards, and things of that nature. So if you want to solve the problems that have the most impact, focus on the offices, the candidates, and the positions that can actually control that impact. So I think it's a very practical approach. I think there's a real practicality about this.
Definitely. And you mentioned, you have 3 young children. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks.
Trent has a newborn.
Yeah. I do.
Please pray for him.
For that and any number of reasons.
Right. Children, we talked earlier today about social media. Right. And how that impacts children in a previous podcast today for our listeners listening at home. Social media is definitely something of the last 20 years where I can remember 1999, we were so focused on the computers crashing, and then we have the advent of social media in the 2010s, Facebook, and we have all that and the messaging, and I know you're on Twitter as well, which is an interesting area to be in.
So many facts.
So many community notes.
Yeah.
How much time do you have? How as a young father with young children, how's your approach to navigating this new world of social media, and how it continues to even today evolve into AI and what's it going to be next month kind of situation? We just continue to progress, and we're not in our government, whether it be local or on a national level, is not caught up to where we are technology. How do you feel like you and your wife are going to navigate through those situations?
Well, we also want to be clear, as someone who used to work for the government, that the government has never been caught up when it comes to technology. So the government is frequently behind in that regard, and in some cases holding back the private sector's development. In any event, I would say, you're also talking to someone who's a huge fan and daily user of ChatGPT, and less popular, don't hate me, but Google's Bard is pretty cool too. So check that out if you haven't. I think social media is a particular challenge because it is, to some degree or another, I don't want to call it a free-for-all. I think a lot of people say that to malign the platforms. They're generally not completely a free-for-all. They do have, to some extent, community standards and things of that nature to try to police a bit. Even Elon Musk's Twitter, despite things they say, does still kick people off the platform. But I think at the end of the day, it's just a matter of knowing, to the extent that kids are smart and good with technology, good with social media, and can get in there and get into all kinds of trouble, there are also tools available to parents. And I think it's incumbent upon parents to be good with technology and cognizant about their options and what they can do. But I think, as it's relevant to this conversation, it's concerning to me because, especially at that younger age when we're so impressionable, and I'm finding out these days that even beyond that younger age, when apparently we continue to be very impressionable, I think post-2016 has taught us a lot about that. I think you've heard the joke that that politics has done to our parents' generation what they were concerned video games would do to us. So it's, I think, but we are really to some extent conditioned in our beliefs and thoughts, in our just general personal disposition and what we see and experience on increasingly the internet these days. And a big piece of that is social media. It's the same for our politics and our values, things that are important to us. I think increasingly unintentionally build these echo chambers, especially starting as a very young person, by just liking, engaging, commenting on content. You start to see that starts to be your kind of pervasive norm, and I think that's part of our challenge for young people, but really for everybody. We want to attract voters of all ages, is to create a different message, a different style, and a different tone. Look, social media is here to stay. Kids are likely to always find one way or another to be on it, be engaged with it. It's not all a bad thing, but that is part of experiencing the modern world, and it's not going away. But we need to provide content. As parents, we need to be engaged in what they're doing, and as a political party, political organizations, and I would say generally stewards of the public trust, we need to be responsible enough. And I think all of us can think of very well-known political figures who are not responsible enough. All of us in those capacities need to be responsible enough to provide content. I would say to some of the political leaders out there that if what you're saying is not what you would want your children to consume, and it isn't what you'd want your children to believe, especially if you're one of the couple of political leaders I know who have gone home and told your children that that's just politics and don't pay too much attention to it, then don't put it out. Because there's a lot of people's kids and families who don't realize and don't see that as just politics, and it's their reality. And I think we have a higher calling and a greater responsibility in person and especially online, where we're meeting a lot of these people, to provide that sort of due diligence in our content.
Definitely. As you know, and you brought up political, and I think that's the one thing I didn't really notice until I was on Twitter, as much as I'm on Twitter, is the amount of just unnecessary tweets from our elected officials, kind of the pointing fingers, the discord, the
when it's also it is in substance and in intent precisely the opposite of what we need. In substance, it's misinformation, and its intent is that to misinform, to spin up and antagonize and energize a base that responds to that sort of misinformation. And so it's precisely what we should be combating, and it's purely for personal political gain. There's not another reason that you would do something like that. And most of these people putting this out know that what they're saying isn't true. So that's sort of what I would call lying, because I think we need to be clear about what it is, and sometimes we're not completely clear about that, is counter to our values.
Well, I mean, often it's like, how many times have you read the radical left, the radical right? It's just pouring gasoline on issues for clicks and likes. I don't think is a responsible way to govern in any level, whether you're governor of a state or you're a school teacher who has a public persona and is basically a role model to children. So,
yes. Well, you also have to remember that too in our system that in many places the outcome of a primary is what determines the outcome of the general election, and you win the primary frequently by just energizing those people that message is intended to energize. That's how you get to such a small percentage of people ultimately, directly or indirectly, deciding policy for 100% of people.
Yeah, and I mean, that's definitely like something that I would like to, as far from a messaging standpoint for the Texas Forward Party, is definitely energize that base of voters who feel like, well, they're disenfranchised, and it's like, my vote doesn't count. But on a Texas level, like, let's focus on the issues in Texas. Let's not worry about what's going on in DC, because we need to fix what's going on in Texas. And I think that that's definitely something.
Yeah, well, look, and I would say too, if you feel like you're disenfranchised, it's likely because you are disenfranchised.
Yeah.
I mean, we should be clear that the intent of a lot of the reforms that we're seeing is to make it harder for you to vote, or for some people, virtually impossible for you to vote. That's the whole point, is to lower participation in our elections, typically at the expense of one, demographic or another. It's not generally a uniform impact across society, these reforms. And I would also say, if you're someone who's just, I hear what you're saying, but I'm just super concerned about the presidential election. I'm super concerned about, Congress or these, federal, races. Well, you know what? Guess what? Where are most of the laws made that affect your ability to vote and influence the outcome of those elections too? In your state, here in Texas. So there's really no way around solving this at the state and local level. Even if you're only concerned about national politics, you can't solve national politics without solving the state and local level.
Definitely. How would you phrase, to that disenfranchised voter, to that voter who feels that they're just throwing their vote away? Yeah. I see this a lot, and basically in interactions with individuals, they're concerned. You're just like everybody else. Nothing's going to change. I see that a lot. Nothing is going to change. Right. How would you approach activating that voter base that's not voting?
Like, look, I think all of us have probably heard the saying that, all that's necessary for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. I would say to everyone who feels that way, I get it. I understand the concern, but all that's needed for the current system to persist is for good voters to believe that their votes don't matter. It's really, you have to understand that that's the point. The point of these reforms is to make it harder for you to vote, for your vote, or for your vote not to. Look, the very point of gerrymandering, we'll use that as that reform, is so that for many of you, your vote doesn't matter. So again, if you feel disenfranchised, it's because you may well be. If you feel like your vote doesn't matter, it's because, well, it may well not. And that's what we have to change. And so I would say that if you continue voting the same way you've always voted, or voting due to the same prerogatives that you've always had, then that system may well persist, because that is the point of the system. And so, if enough voters feel that their vote is wasted, then we can't achieve this. We need enough voters to believe, and they should believe, because it's true, that we can band together and actually solve this problem. But we have to provide the pathway and the mechanism to do that, and that involves creating competition. There are districts out there, especially in Texas, where, for example, a Democrat is never going to win. Democrat is simply never going to win. It's very, very, very badly gerrymandered, and in some cases, there may not even be competition to the Republican candidate. So in those cases, if you write somebody in, or vote in some other way, are you throwing your vote away? Maybe in 2023 you are, but we're going to provide you a different option, and we need you to come along with us. We're going to provide that competition. We want to change the way that redistricting is done, and we need you to come along with us so that we can accomplish those things, so that there's no such thing as throwing your vote away. There's just such a thing as voting for the candidates in the order, ranked choice voting or some other thing, that you want to vote for.
I love that. I love that message. I just want to say we should totally put that on the webpage. That is just that. Yeah, that's what it's about. Come along in this journey with us. This hasn't really been done in over 150 years. We are ripe for change. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, there's no such thing as just, okay, let's just sit back and wait while the Ford party solves this. It doesn't work that way. It does not work that way. Change requires people at the grassroots level to get involved, to demand change, to roll up their sleeves and come and work together each other and with groups that are committed to making that happen. That's how change has always happened in this country, and it's how it's going to continue to happen in this country. So, a handful of executive committee members aren't going to solve this, but we're committing to provide. We are committed to providing the organization and the infrastructure so that people can come along with us and solve it with us. And I think that's the important takeaway for people, is to come solve it with us. We want, we are all invested in this, but just by the mere fact that you live here in this country and are a citizen of this country, or you work in this country, you're invested in this. There's no way to be disinvested in this, because these decisions affect you regardless of your socioeconomic status, even your citizenship status in some cases. These reforms affect your life and your ability to make a good living, ability to provide for your family, for me to put my kids through school and get them a good education. You're affected by it, whether you take part in it or not. So why not take part in it? And why not take part in it with a group that's committed to solving it for my family and for your family?
Definitely. And that we're activating citizens that have no political experience, that are bringing so much insight, innovation to the table, I think is what, for me, is so unique about the Forward Party. That
Absolutely.
we are just basically, like, whether you're work in accounting like I do, or you are a teacher, we're all coming to the table to, hey, we need to solve these problems, and what's working, what's this is not working. What's going on right now is not working. So definitely,
if you do think that what's going on right now is really working well, we should also maybe we should have a podcast with somebody. It'd be a very interesting conversation.
Right.
It seems so clear that it isn't.
Right. You're so happy to pay, $3 more for a pound of bacon. Then I'd like to talk to you. We're calling viewers.
People are literally bartering with eggs.
Right. Definitely. I think from a point of view of, obviously we're executive committee members, and not everybody has that coveted title of an executive member, executive members, but we also want to encourage people, whether you want to be a community organizer or you want to work in social media,
right,
or something along that lines, where you feel like you can make a difference doing what you can do. And I think that's what's so important about meeting people at where they're at.
Yep. Agree. I completely agree. And I think our followers, current and future, because there's a giant number of the latter and a pretty big number of the former, should realize that, almost nothing here is reserved to executive committee members. The executive committee member seats are reserved to the executive committee. Other than that, even our executive committees and subcommittees can be staffed by volunteers. So when we say grassroots organizing and building from the ground up, that doesn't just mean, look, hey, will you retweet us on social media? Definitely do that.
Yeah, please.
But not limited to that. It doesn't just mean host an event for us. Please do that, but not just that. You can come and serve on the executive committee without being elected to the executive committee. You can come and help us with our committees. You can come help us with our communications committee, finance committees, our policy committee. You can come and help us set direction here. So when we say, grassroots up, it doesn't mean we're allowing that from the top, but you can come and take part at the top. And I think that's important to realize, and we've got opportunities now, so come talk to us.
Yes, we will put you to work. Definitely, 100%.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And whether you're a young man in high school, or a young woman in high school, or you are a senior who wants to help us with mailing or anything creative, or calling, phone banks, as you believe, although honestly, I'm concerned about the window we have in 2024, how hot it is in Texas for door knockers and boots on the ground. But we need you. We need you brave souls to come out and...
I mentioned rolling up sleeves. Maybe just go full sleeveless.
Right, exactly. Tank top. I mean, bring your sunscreen, bring some water. We can use you.
But, look, I would say, people... you hear all the time it's hot and it's a tough time of year, and you've heard that, a million times. But I would also counter that mentality with, the forces kind of arrayed against this reform don't take the summer off, and so as hot as it is, as much as it's uncomfortable, we can't take the summer off, taking the summer off preserves the status quo. We have a harder job ahead of us than they have ahead of them. And so, this is weekends, this is weekdays, this is, it gets actually kind of cold here for a couple of weeks too now. But hey, we can't take that time off either. So
no, and definitely, like you said earlier, like they make it as hard as possible for any competition, whether you're in a northern state where that to get on that boots on the ground, like to get petition signed is in the dead of winter.
Right.
In Texas, it's just a little more convenient to have it in May.
Yeah.
So.
I know. Yeah, I know. Anything to make it a little more challenging. The short little window to get all the signatures. Right. No real reason for any of that other than, to make it difficult. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, I think from a perspective of, I think that's really important that like you said before, is that we are not just singling out Democrats. We're not just a Democratic. We want to bring to the table people who want change, who see that there's a problem, and who want to work towards solving that problem, however long it takes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I just personally think about the Ford Party, and our mission isn't to build another option. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's to solve problems. And however it is that we need to do that. Now, building another option is kind of the how of it. It's the mechanism by which we intend to solve those problems, but there's more to it. Endorsing a reasonable candidate from another party may be one of the tools that we need to leverage in order to solve problems. Building ourselves as another option is a way to solve problems. Creating a multi-competitive system where other parties can compete is a way to solve problems. So we want to build another option. We want to build ourselves, but it's important to keep the focus on the to what end, the goal, and that's to solve problems. And there's going to be a number of different ways that we do that.
Yeah, and I think it's important to not put forward in a box, so to speak. Just be like, oh, well, we're just gonna do it this way, and this is the right way. And I think that the Republicans and the Democrats both are guilty of doing this. Those rigid party lines where if you say something, you're a bad person.
Right. Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think it's important. I can't harp on enough that it's important, despite all that going on. To me, those are distractions, and they're an attempt and incentive created by the current system to distract, to convince you not to vote, to convince you that your vote doesn't matter, but to keep you from ultimately solving problems and creating a system that's more competitive. Because a system that's more competitive is a system that doesn't elect current incumbents and current parties at the same rate. And I think ultimately that is what it comes down to. And it's not just that it's not democratic, it's anti-democratic. It's attempting to limit the effectiveness of democracy to preserve the power of those who currently have it. And that's basically antithetical to the founders, to the Constitution, to what a democracy is. It's to what a republic is, for people who are going to say we're not a democracy, we're a republic, even though we're technically both. So I think we shouldn't be antithetical to our values and to democracy in a democracy.
100%. Well, thank you very much today for this very enlightening conversation about all things Ford and just where we're at in Texas and moving forward. The puns are never endless. So I wanted to thank the viewers at home for watching us today. I'm Julie Cornegie, and this is Trent Newell. Thank you so much for tuning in today. So this is our lightning round questions. So are you ready?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Okay. Favorite thing about Texas?
The fact that we are more successful than any other state at appealing business jobs and headquarters from other states.
I love that. Favorite book or movie?
I'm kind of sappy. My favorite movie is Titanic.
Okay, we'll have to discuss that later.
Yeah, we'll talk about that's not one for a lightning round.
Right? If you could live anywhere else in the world, where would it be?
I wouldn't live anywhere else in the world.
I love that. I love that too. Dog or cat person? No pressure.
No pressure. I'm feeling a little pressure from Cat Mom here, but I'm actually a dog person. Sorry for the wrong answer.
Right. Okay, one word to describe what attracted you to the Forward Party.
Possibilities.
What one cause, thing would you want to see change in your lifetime?
Whew. I hope that my lifetime is long and that there are many things that will be changed in my lifetime. I suppose what I want to see change the most is that I just want my kids to have the ability to control their futures and their destinies to the same extent that I believed when I was younger I had the ability to control it. And I think that's part and parcel to why I'm here trying to do this today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Dun, dun, dun.